Well, good morning to you all. It's great to be with you in the house of the Lord this morning. I'm speaking today on disappointments are not dead ends. I've chose to use the text from Mark chapter 2, verses 1 through 12, and Hebrews chapter 2, verses 1 through 13. You know, can you hear me all right?
I don't think your mic's on.
Well, we'll just have to endure for a season if my mic is on or if it's off. Maybe it's just me that's off and the mic is on.
Your big brother has said amen to that.
Well, sometimes for me, life is like a roller coaster. Has many ups and downs. There are times when the unexpected erupts and our plans are abruptly changed. It's interesting to observe how people cope with the unexpected, especially if the sudden change has a negative bearing on their plans. We've all had our share of disappointments. All of us know what it means to have it rain on our parade. Our fondest hopes have sometimes been crushed. And each such experience is hard to take. But you know what? It's not the end of the world. It's not even the end of the road. Life is a lot like a baby just beginning to walk. There's days when the going is smooth and success is ours to enjoy. But there's also days of distress, hours of hindrance, minutes of misunderstandings, and seconds of stumbling. We've watched them, little ones. And since the path of life is rocky, and the road toward the top has many unexpected turns, it's important for you to realize three things concerning potholes on the road to the top. Number one, there's going to be times when you fail. Anyone who walks down the path of life not only has the privilege of enjoying it, but also must take the risk of failing. Any person that's willing to stand for something may at times be knocked down and knocked down. We sometimes become careless and get in a hurry. Many times this happens just before we meet our goal. It looks as though we've been successful. The obstacles have been overcome. The sweet smell of victory permeates the air. But then something happens. You know, I don't know much about football. Elmer does, Wayne does, you do. I don't, but I know just a little bit to get confused at times. But some time ago, I don't remember what football game it was, but I watched this player make an exciting run toward the defensive line, and he had great skill and speed, enough to outrun the defensive backs. But as he was approaching the goal line, he thrust his hands in the air, and the football popped out of his hands. He fumbled on the 3-yard line. And I'll never forget the look of surprise and disappointment that came over his face. You know, I too have sometimes been careless and fallen down just before reaching the goal. And I can definitely relate to his feelings. Sometimes our inexperience causes us to fail. Sometimes lack of preparation is the problem. Sometimes the problem is simply overconfidence. One thing is certain, regardless of the reason for failing, we all, at times, trip and down we fall. That's part of life. So that's number one. There will be times when you fail. Number two, the more we attempt to do, the more likelihood that we'll fail. My mother told me that when I was very little, I was so bow-legged that I couldn't stand up and walk. And she said that it became such a challenge for me that I gave up even trying to walk. And I didn't walk very well until I was about 14 months old. She told me that I could have done a whole lot better, but because I fell so often, the fall became a disappointment to me, and I didn't want to fall anymore. So don't walk. Don't walk. If you don't walk, you don't fall. And my problem was that as a baby, the shock of that fall to control my actions, I allowed that to happen instead of being controlled by what little success I had along the way. So we're going to fail at times in things that we attempt to do. Number three, the difference between success and failure is how we react after the failure. If we become involved with life and become players instead of spectators, the obstacles of life will sometimes trip us up. The lives of many people have gone awry because of the mistakes they made or bad experience that made their way and came their way. So they have allowed the bitter taste of defeat to remain in their mouths until only notes of negativism spill out. Their lives have been centered around failure instead of the excitement of their journey. You know, the Bible gives us a classic example of how reacting to a failure determines our outcome. King David, King Saul, they both sat on the throne of Israel. Both were chosen of God, and both had many, many talents. Both fell. Both failed. King Saul allowed his mistake to harden his heart, and he ended up dying a violent death. King David, on the other hand, repented and asked God's forgiveness and had fruitful years of leadership after his sin. We have to remember that the failure is not in the fall. The failure is in allowing our fall to keep us down and to control our lives. We need to determine to be like a college classmate I had who stood up in chapel and said, I won't forget his words. He said, you know what? I am never down. Never down. He said, I'm either up or I'm getting up. I like that. I like that. You know, one of my favorite Bible stories is recorded in the Gospel of Mark in chapter 2. Jesus had completed his tour of the synagogues and had returned back to Capernaum. The news that Jesus was in town, staying at a certain house, spread quickly through the city, and the crowd hurriedly came. And soon the house was jam-packed full of people waiting to hear Jesus. Among those with keen interest in seeing Jesus were 4 men bringing their physically handicapped, disabled friend on a stretcher. And when they saw that the house was crowded with people, they climbed to the roof. Can you get a picture of that? They climbed to the roof, chopped a hole in the roof, big enough so that they could lower their friend down right by the feet of Jesus. These 4 men were extraordinary. Every time I think of this story, I ask myself, what kind of people would knock a hole in the roof? Allow me to suggest some characteristics of people like that. Number 1 is a concern for others. Unselfishness was a characteristic that marked these men. To bring a sick man, a sick friend, to Jesus meant denying themselves many of the blessings others would receive. It meant giving up front row seat for a friend, caring enough to be inconvenienced. The beauty of genuine concern is its willingness to become involved without being influenced by the price tag. So, we have a concern for others, number 1. Number 2, there's a spirit of cooperation. It took all 4 of them to bring their friend to Jesus. Each man realized the importance of the other. Success would be achieved only if every man continued to hold up his part of the bed. Failure was inevitable if any one of them decided to do his own thing. You know, the truth of this is underlined in the story of the people of Israel. They're fighting against the Amalekites in the wilderness. Find that in Exodus chapter 17. And when their leader Moses stretched his hands towards heaven, the Israelites would advance towards victory. When his hands and his arms became so tired that they fell to his side, the Amalekites started advancing. Aaron and Hur were there. They were watching. They could see what was happening. And they realized that the victory would be possible only with their cooperation. With team spirit, they both grasped Moses' hands and stretched him high towards heaven until victory was won. You know, you think about Moses now, he's relieved of that heaviness. But we don't think so much about Aaron and Hur. They're standing there, and it doesn't say anything about them getting weary. But they have to. They have to. But they decided that they needed to stay there in this spirit of cooperation, keeping their hands toward heaven until the victory was won. It would be profitable for each one of us to realize that we need each other. Coming together is the beginning, but working together produces the victory. Number 3, a firm belief that the only answer is Jesus. The conviction that only Jesus could take care of their friend's problem gave these men a certain boldness and determination. They could have said, he's too heavy, crowd's too large, or we've lost our opportunity. I can't climb that high. I didn't bring an axe. They could have gone home discouraged and missed a miracle. But they refused to quit. When former heavyweight champion James Colbert was asked what it took to go to the top, he replied these words: fight one more round. And then he added, when your feet are so tired that you have to shuffle back to the center of the ring, just fight one more round. The determination of 4 men made victory and meant victory for their friend. Another heavyweight fighter, Muhammad Ali. You know that name. He said, you know what you have to do to win? He says you get knocked down 7 times, you get up 8. And he proved that over again. Number 4 is have priorities straight. These men knew that the most important thing in the world at that moment was to bring their friend to Jesus. So, up on the rooftop they went, just like the reindeer. There wasn't any reindeer there. No doubt they were besieged by thoughts such as, I wonder if this will disturb the service. Can you see someone chopping through that roof? Or thinking, you know what, we've never done anything like this before. What will the people think? And yet, they were determined. They wouldn't stop. And you wonder why? It's because they had a job to do that was greater than the threat of being different. Thank God for people who are willing to knock holes in roofs. They're the pacesetters, the barrier breakers, the miracle producers. They're different because they're determined. They're criticized because just because they're concerned. But their priorities were right and straight when they knew that they had to take their friend where he could be helped, and that was with Jesus. You know, one of my special joys is leading people in the privilege of helping them to believe in themselves. Regardless of age, gender, background. It's a challenge to help instill within an individual a certain self-confidence that will eliminate uncertainty about solving a problem or help him or her establish a positive outlook regarding the solution. It's amazing how many people allow their thinking to determine how much they accomplish in life. Like the comment, we've never done before. Or someone says to you, don't be such a dreamer. Don't get your hopes up too high. Those kind of comments have stymied people. Where they would have been achievers in life. Too many people are dwelling in slums when they should be rising to the stars. Years ago, as I was preparing this, I was thinking about this particular incident. And my first wife, Karen, and I were just out for a drive. She wanted a cold drink, kind of like Lois does too. Yeah. Diet Coke. Well, Karen wanted a Diet Coke as well. And I'm a coffee drinker, so I stopped and ordered a cup of coffee and a Diet Coke. And they said, oh, we don't have Diet Coke. I said, well, just give me a cup with ice in it and I'll get a Coke somewhere else. She says, I can't do that. I said, yes, you can. Just give me a cup with ice in it. She thought for a minute, said, okay. So I got the coffee and I got the cup of ice. No problem at all. What she needed, I think, was someone just to reassure her that she could do what was asked of her. So often people fail to get involved in working and helping others. Not because they lack the ability or willingness to do so, but because they lack the confidence and assurance that they can do the job. I read one time, years ago, a group of new engineers in the lamp division of General Electric were assigned the seemingly impossible task of frosting bulbs on the inside. No one believed it was even possible. and it was largely treated as a joke around there. But eventually, however, an undaunted newcomer named Marion Pipkin not only found a way to frost bulbs on the inside, but also developed an etching acid that produced minutely rounded pits of sharp depressions. And this discovery actually strengthened every bulb. Fortunately, no one had convinced Mr. Pipkin that it couldn't be done. And so he did it. He just did it. But you know what? Too often the reverse is true. As we travel along the road of life, many negative seeds are planted in our minds until we stop short of what we can do for God, for others, and for ourselves. I remember as a young teenager, I was sitting in Woody's Grill in Durand. And there was a big round table where the businessmen sat. And one of them said to the others, in fact, it was Elton Pratt, Wayne, Elmer, you know. And I heard him say that Johnny Walworth is no good, and he's going straight to hell. I'm telling you, those words hung on my mind, and they're still there. Later on, he knew that he had made a mistake about Johnny Walworth, that he wasn't such a bad apple after all. But sometimes when we hear things, we believe it to be true, even if it's about ourselves. Sometimes especially if it's about ourselves. So the next time you're expecting to stop short of a goal, remember what I'm saying to you today. You can do it. You can do it. And if that's not enough, remember what the Apostle Paul is also saying to you in Philippians 4:13. I can do everything through him who gives me strength. Disappointments are not dead ends. I want to wrap this up with a little story that Chuck Swindoll told years and years ago. I'm saying years ago. And he titled this, Don't Let Life Steal Your Song. Chuck tells the story of a parakeet named Chirpy. The bird's problem began one day when the lady who owned him decided to clean the dirt and feathers out of the bottom of his cage. And using a vacuum cleaner, suddenly the phone rang and she turned to pick it up. You guessed it. An awful sucking sound. Whoosh. Chirpy was gone. In a panic, she turned off the vacuum cleaner, unzipped the bag, and there was Chirpy, stunned but still breathing. Seeing he was covered in thick black dirt, she rushed him to the bathtub where she turned on the cold water full blast and held him under it. At that point, she had realized that she had even done more damage. So she quickly cranked up the blow dryer and gave him a blast. Swindoll finished the story by saying, Chirpy doesn't sing much anymore. So don't let life steal your song. There are people who have had it better than you and done worse. There are people who've had it worse than you and done better. The secret of enduring victory is in the words of David. His praise will always be on my lips. We need to remember that praise is not a church thing. It's a lifestyle. And it'll change all of our approaches to problems. It'll change your attitude toward people and the atmosphere around you. David said, 7 times a day do I praise you. Psalms 119, verse 164, I think it is. So, go ahead and schedule that in your day and see what happens. And remember that disappointments are never dead ends. There's always a road to recovery. And if you can't do it on your own, let your friends help you. That's what friends are for. Father, thank you for today. Thank you for your word. Thank you for your help, for your ministry to us, Lord. Bless us, encourage us, Father, in Jesus' name.